also to my right, we have one of our newest members of the legislature, Ms. Ivy. I'll introduce you and welcome to the table. And just, I know you're going to say hi and excuse yourself, but glad to see you and appreciate you being visible and available and when you come to see us.
Thanks. My name is Kathleen Weeby. I am newly elected. I'm a Granite School District teacher, and I was on the school board for 2 years. I have a microscopic version of the budget for you guys that I'd like to share with you. I'm always available. I appreciate how much your staff and your team reached out to me over the session. I think we did pretty good. It was a very odd session because of the pending tax reevaluation, so that kind of brought everything to a grinding halt. But we did a lot of work, and I made some contacts, and it was really great to work with your team and teams of the cities, and the city of Lincoln Town, the towns of cities. That's it. So thank you so much. So I'm going to pass this budget out for you. If you want to contact me at any time, you guys know how to get in touch with me. If you ever want to meet or discuss anything, I'm always available to you all. I appreciate the emails I've gotten. And I appreciate your constant contact. Thanks. Here you go. You are so welcome.
So Senator, I know I was asking you on the side, maybe you could respond again. What's the plan or the approach with respect to the sales tax issue going forward?
What's the approach? So we think that there is a unequal tax collection where we're getting not enough sales tax. So that's what they're really looking at. They actually had a plan of who they were going to approach with the sales tax, but there was a lot of carve-outs and a lot of industries felt really put upon, and it seemed to be inequitable. So we're going to look at how we're going to have more equity in our sales tax collection. There was also a discussion about changing the formula for income tax and going to education. That did not make it onto the ballot, but that's something that they are still going to deal with. They are considering putting a sales tax on food again. So there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot that's kind of scary for us, and there's, like we said, we just want to kind of keep it equitable. So, and I would prefer if we didn't have a regressive tax that put a huge burden on our most vulnerable populations. But then they also point of sales. I know how each city has a different not a different formula, but how each city claims more or loses more depending on how we change our point of sales. So that was something that I was really cognizant of, and I tried really hard to protect my cities for that.
So I guess there's a stakeholders group that will be meeting soon?
Yeah, they just had a task force created, like yesterday they had a news brief on it. We have Representative Briscoe, Fillmore, Cullimore, who is our neighboring city, so there's some good people on it, Bramble, but we haven't really heard that much about that yet.
We'll be anxious to watch, especially when they try to incorporate services, impacting services and point of sale issue there again.
Yeah.
And then the distribution formula too is always a concern for us.
Yes, definitely. And it is hard because Murray has a whole different tax structure than Cottonwood Heights and Harriman, so we try to hold everybody as harmless as possible.
That's the challenge.
That is the challenge. So all of your meetings are on Tuesdays, so I'm going to try to come quarterly. If there's anything you'd like me to be here for, please feel free to reach out.
Or if you ever would like a more formal time, let us know. You're welcome anytime.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Nice to see you all. And would you guys like this as well? Little handouts. Just a small $18 billion.
Okay, we also have another new employee with the Arts Council. So, do you want to introduce her?
Yeah, Carolyn Whitmore, culture coordinator, worked with the Arts Council. She started about a week and a half ago, correct?
Yes.
And it's good to have you on board, and we're excited for her work.
To be here.
Okay, looking at the agenda, we have one of our esteemed constituents who represents us with Salt Lake City Public Utilities, Ted Boyer, who's been on the board now for
about 4 years, I think.
4 or 5 years, and gives us a regular report. And raised the issue before about the rate differential for those of us who are outside Salt Lake City. I know it's something they studied, so we've asked Ted to come and maybe report to us and have that process and what ended up. Thank you, Ted.
Great. Mr. Mayor, thank you, and members of the City Council. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. I've prepared just a bullet point outline of what I'm going to cover very briefly, but I'm going to focus more on the rate differential issue because that's one that I've been working on myself. But so I am the Cottonwood Heights representative on the Salt Lake City Public Utilities Advisory Committee, which consists of volunteers, but we're appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. And
Are you chairing that this year?
no, I did chair it 2 years ago. I did chair it 2 years ago. And my many prior lives, one of my many prior lives was I was chair of the the Utah Public Service Commission. So I regulated electrical and natural gas, some water, some telephone. I thought I'd first talk about some 2019 bills that affect water, potentially affect water. As you probably know, there's been some pressure, generally from landowners of undeveloped property up in the canyons, dry land that was purchased a long time ago, and people want to develop that and, make some money off of it, to restrict the ability of Salt Lake City and other municipalities from protecting the watershed. And their issue was to try to reduce the protected area to 300 feet on either side of the water source, Big Cottonwood Freeze, for example. And that's problematic for the city and for us because historically we've been able to protect from ridgeline to ridgeline because, as you know, stuff flows downhill. There were 3 bills that kind of dealt with these issues and also the ability of Salt Lake City to service areas outside of their municipal boundaries. And there was a House Joint Resolution HJR 1, which is a proposal to present to voters an amendment of the Utah Constitution. And it was proposed by Kevin Stratton and Keith Grover. It generally codifies the historic practices. A second one, it was HB 31, which is entitled Water Supply and Surplus Water Amendments. That was a bill by Kim Coleman and Ralph Okerlund. Again, that codifies the historic status quo. It permits different rates to different classes of customers, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. It states that rates must be reasonable and adequate, and the city has to give notice of rate changes to all classes of customers, whether they live within the city or out of the city. And then it requires advisory board representation, which is my function on Cottonwood Heights, and there are people from other Mill Creek and Holiday as well. And then SB 17, which is a Rutherford and Tim Hawk's bill, talks about the process for municipalities to exercise their extraterritorial jurisdiction. Again, all 3 of these pretty much codify historic practices which have served us well for over 100 years in the state of Utah. So we're fairly pleased with how these came out, and we were a little nervous a year ago in the 2018 session because it looked like things might change, and we felt slightly vulnerable. I wanted to briefly touch on the 2019 and 2020 Salt Lake Public Utilities proposed budget. You'll notice that there have been increases the last 2 years, and they're proposed and forecasting rate increases in the future as well. And there's the basic reason for this is there was a coincidence of different factors that affected public utilities. First of all, the infrastructure in Salt Lake City was built in the 50s. And so it probably past the end of its useful life. And so we've got this aging infrastructure. Secondly, there are increasingly stringent environmental regulations, both state and federal, which require upgrading and using new technologies to both treat sewer and water, and potable water. And then the movement of the prison from Point of the Mountain to the Northwest Quadrant. It's not ultimately going to cost Salt Lake City anything, but it accelerated the upgrading of infrastructure, sewer lines and valves and that sort of thing in the northwest quadrant. So the city wasn't quite ready to start on that, but they had to in order to accommodate both the growth in the northwest quadrant and this prison. So for the next year, for 2019 and 2020, the proposed rate increases, which haven't gone into effect yet or been approved, is a 5% increase for water, 18% for sewer, and 10% for stormwater. Those percentages are sort of alarming, but when it hits the bill, it's, you know, it's cents or $1 or $1.10 or something like that. It's not as scary as it sounds. And the monies, of course, you have to cover your operational expenses, but so many capital improvement projects have been required that part of that rate is going to go to pay that and to pay for financing, bond financing, to complete these infrastructure improvements. On the water side, they're going to repair and upgrade the treatment plants, including Big Cottonwood Canyon. Some of the reservoirs, Mountain Dell, for example, they're really deteriorating. If you were to go up there and look, a lot of the cement is eroded away, and you can see rebar and, you know, chunks of concrete and that sort of thing. And they've allocated about $61.5 million to replace this. And the other thing they're going to do is replace existing water meters with smart meters so that they can read them remotely, which will be, you know, much more effective and efficient. On the sewer side, the water reclamation facility is really antiquated. It is not state-of-the-art in any sense of the word. And they're going to, they are in the process of replacing the entire system at a cost of about $98 million. They're replacing lines in roadways. Whenever roads are torn up or repaved or something like that, it's the perfect time to put in new pipes, and they're doing that in coordination with UDOT. And then the sewer plant, the new sewer plant is going to use state-of-the-art technology, a whole new, right now they have big beds, you know, that just put the solid matter out in the air and it dries and they tuck it off and take it out to the landfill or use it for fill and those kinds of things. They're going to use state-of-the-art technology, and the new system, the new sewer plant, will accommodate expansion in the future if growth exceeds what is forecast. And then stormwater, it's just a matter, again, of ancient infrastructure, so they're going to replace collection lines. They want to improve resiliency of the system, you know, backup systems and that sort of thing, and safety. And that's about $12.5 million.
Ted, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
So, sewer and stormwater for Salt Lake City Public Utilities, does that also affect us in our city?
Not directly, no.
Okay, yeah, I was just saying,
Not
I
directly.
understand the water part, but yeah,
Yeah.
that part, yeah, okay.
But it all goes into the rate structure that they set.
The water rate structure?
Well, I'm just talking about rates generally for
Okay, yeah.
Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
And, yeah, but we're the ones that impacted, you know, by water, obviously, because we do get our water from there. In 2018, the city decided to do a rate study. They hadn't analyzed rates, either the way rates are created or the way rates are structured for decades, really. And so they hired a consulting group called Raftellus, and they created a rate study group that consisted of different members of the public from different rate classes of rate payers and different interests, commercial, industrial, residential, schools, parks, different geographical areas, and sort of that sort of thing. And I ingratiated myself onto that committee. I was a non-voting member, but I got to, you know, be a fly on the wall and watch them. And I was the guy that was jabbing with a sharp stick about the rate differential, because we in Cottonwood Heights pay, you know, 35% more than Salt Lake City residents, and there are a lot of reasons for that, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But the objectives of this rate study were to make sure that utility rates were fair, reasonable, and adequate, and they wanted to make sure there was no cross-subsidization. And you will see that that in fact the rates were cross-subsidization. In fact, residential customers were subsidizing commercial and industrial rates. We were paying more than our fair share. And so the rate study group, and I supported this even though I wasn't a voting member of the group, adopted a new approach to rate structure, which is called class cost of service rates. And instead of saying, historically, Salt Lake City has charged the same rate to all classes of customers. But, just common sense tells you that it costs more to service some customers than others customers. Bigger meters, more volume, bigger pipes, all that kind of stuff. And so class cost of service looks at how much does it cost to serve a typical residential customer, commercial, industrial, and some of these other users, which I also was in favor of. The rate components are the same as they've always been. I mean, you have to cover your capital costs, you have to cover maintenance, you have to cover replacements, and all your operational costs, salaries, and all that sort of thing. And they consist of a base rate that covers that, what does it cost to put a meter on your house? And then there's another, volumetric usage rate. And so the rate consists of those two. The results of this study and the recommendations, which have not yet been approved by the city or city council of Salt Lake, concluded that they are going to use a class of service approach. They don't want it to be unduly burdensome on any class of customers, but particularly low-income customers. And what will happen is the base rate for residential customers has been reduced slightly, 2.5%, something like that. And so the net is that even though rates are going up, we all, as residents here, will see a slight reduction in our water bills for this next year, if these rates are approved.
That was just the base rate?
The base rate, yes.
Are the usage rates also?
No. Well, they have adjusted the usage rates to cover cost of service of the class. So they are a little bit lower as well. They are actually a little bit lower. On the rate differential, they had, and partly at my insistence, they asked Raftelis, the consulting company, to analyze the current rate differential, which is about 1.35% of what the city customers pay. Historically, that differential has ranged from 1.63 to 1.5. So it's a little bit lower than it has been historically. But Raftelis, who did the analysis, determined that that rate differential is fair and consistent with what's going on in other parts of the country. The rationale is that city customers are owners, and they're responsible for repaying debt, capital costs, and that sort of thing. So they have an element of risk that we don't have throughout the country. The theory is that non-residential customers should pay a return on the investment the city has made in building them. These are called these legacy costs of creating the system and putting the pipes in, creating, purchasing the water rights, and building the discovery. So I think we're kind of stuck with a rate differential. As I say, I wasn't a voting member of that thing, but that's kind of the rationale. Raftelis determined that it was fair and just and equitable.
Can I ask a question?
You can.
related to that? It seems that as the infrastructure ages and the burden to replace the infrastructure falls on all ratepayers, that cost of investment is depreciated, and the new investment is paid by all participants. Now, the risk may be a little different because the bonding risk doesn't fall to all, but would you see it that same way?
I do see it exactly that same way. And then you have the intergenerational equities or inequities as well. New Salt Lake City residents pay the same as old Salt Lake City residents, and so they're not asked to contribute to those legacy costs as we are on the outside. But they are owners, they do pay the city tax.
There's a separate city water property tax?
No, it's just
It's just your
It's
general
more
what the city
goes into the
assesses.
city budget.
But
It's not separate. Whoops. Sorry.
Sandy pay the premium?
Used to write Arlex. Beg your pardon?
The Sandy city pay the premium, the 135%.
Sandy does not, but they don't
They
receive.
used to, but they don't anymore.
I don't,
Does Sandy have their own water?
They joined Salt Lake.
they get it from Salt Lake Metro, don't they?
Yeah.
Salt Lake
I
Metropolitan.
don't think it's Salt Lake City.
That was another element of the rates that I didn't mention, that is Salt Lake Metropolitan Water System, Salt Lake City purchases water from them, and they've increased their rates as well. So that's another element of the rate structure.
A little side note. you
Yes.
know, And I think this is just kind of the elephant in the room across the valley with the episode that happened in Sandy on, was it the fluoride?
Yeah.
thing? Did that come up in your board meetings?
It
as
did.
far as-
Yeah, we asked what went wrong there, and what are we doing differently?
Exactly.
And,
We
and
didn't have that at the
the
moment.
explanation I received, and I didn't read this in the press, but the explanation I received on the committee was that in Sandy, they had the fluoridation system and the water pumps on the same electrical circuit. Or no, they were on separate circuits. And the pumps, the circuit that ran the pumps failed, the chlorinator kept pumping chlorine into the system. In Salt Lake City, they're on the same electrical circuit, so if one goes down, both goes down. So they feel like they've mitigated those risks, but the city did a lot of work just to make sure that nothing like that happened in the city. Good question. Good question.
Is there a plan to depreciate or wean off of those legacy costs?
You know, I asked them, what I expected was an accounting, I mean, cause I've been in this area since 1975. And so I've been paying that premium for, lots of years. And I said, when do we amortize those legacy costs? And they never gave me a definitive answer for that. The Raftellus report did not. They said they did the financial analysis, but I've not seen it. So I don't know, but.
They said a very, very, very similar thing about, 5, 6, when they did the study to justify when they set the 35%. They were gonna go quite a bit higher, but we might be able to.
Well, it's something we have to
negotiate.
continue to monitor.
Yeah.
I expect we'll always pay, some kind of a differential. I mean, I argued that, we're right here at the mouth of the Cottonwood Canyon. Then we have to pump it. It just flows by gravity down and out of our faucets. But they say that there are all these other costs, and then the risk element that I talked about, and then the legacy costs. So I know you have lots of stuff to do, but just in kind of.
I won't make any friends, but I suspect if you took whatever portion of Salt Lake City's budget was that went to water, and you
Spread it out.
fused that amongst the people who are paying
The differential.
35% premium, it might not add up to the 30,000.
It probably wouldn't. It'd be nice to see those numbers, but, I've tried as I could, I've not seen them. But let me just conclude by saying, I've watched management and leadership of the Salt Lake City Public Utilities, and it really is a well-run organization. Laura Briefer is the director, and she just does a terrific job. She's come in with fresh eyes. Jeff, who ran it before, had been there for 20-some odd years, a good guy, he ran it well, but she's just looking at things a little bit differently. And so I really appreciate that. I've observed that Salt Lake City has a lot of their employees stay for their entire careers. They have tons of people that have been there 20 years, 25 years. They give awards every year. They have a picnic in the summer, which I typically go to, and they're giving these 25-year pins and 30-year pins and that sort of thing. So they must be doing something right because people stay. I think that after these capital improvements are fully capitalized and paid for in the next couple of 3 years, the system should be adequate for decades. We shouldn't be hit with these kinds of things, deferred maintenance, if you will. The city is anticipating growth in terms of residents of between 20 and 25% by 2060. And they've used different techniques to conserve water. Usage is down about 25% from 2000 to now. That's pretty significant, but there's still more that can be done. And the city believes that we have to develop additional sources. Average water production is about 146,000 acre feet per year. In a dry year, it's 126,000 acre feet. So we've got a good year this year, we'll be fine, but we're catching up from these other years. So generally, residential rates will be down about 2.7%. Commercials are going up 8.06, so there has been that subsidy over time. And similar is true of sewer rates, but we don't get it next year. Anyway, that's a little bit I know.
Well, that's a lot, and thank you. I think as a city, we're blessed to have someone with your background as a volunteer to represent us and give us regular reports. And I know from Laura personally that she appreciates your involvement. She said, you know, he isn't there just to listen, he actively participates and challenges us, and so we're hearing that from the other side as well, so we appreciate
It
that.
does feel like I add some value.
Are
But I think I'm supposed to be reappointed, but I haven't been reappointed yet, so I.
they supposed to ask us to do that?
No, they do it. And they have a 2 terms and you're out approach, so I'm probably okay, and the existing rules provide that I'll serve until I'm replaced. So
We're glad to
I'll
do
keep
it.
going, as long as I can walk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Terry.
A ride.
All right, looking at your agenda, let's take a minute and review our business meeting. Of course, we have the welcome pledge and we have those citizen comments. And I assume we'll have a few people there tonight because of the agenda, so be prepared for that. Mike, I'll turn it over to you and you can talk about the 3 items you have on the agenda.
Sure. Pull up some slides, I'll just walk through them quickly. And I'll give another
There
presentation.
may be a few questions on a couple of these.
Yep. I'll plan to give this presentation or a more thorough version of it in the business meeting as well.
Don't let me skip over that. Invite me around.
Matt, do you mind? Yeah.
Are you doing the wireless or which?
Yeah, click share. Okay. So we have 3 applications for zone changes that have been through the planning commission hearing process and received recommendations. As legislative items, any rezone will come to city council for final consideration and approval. The formal public hearing and the required public hearing took place at planning commission, but it's practice to have a meeting of public comment at city council as well. So that's what tonight is. There's no decision scheduled, it's just public comment on these 3 rezone items. 2 of them are fairly close to each other on Fort Union Boulevard. These, I'm guessing, are not the controversial of the 3, so I'll go through these relatively quickly. One is 1810 East Fort Union. This is right next to the fire station on Fort Union Boulevard, directly to the east.
For sale right now too.
Yes. It's a little over half an acre. The surrounding area, you can see, the existing zoning is either public facility with the fire station to the west, neighborhood commercial to the east, to the north across the street, and then full commercial, regional commercial east of that. So you can see kind of here
Go back real quick, sorry.
that one.
Turn around.
Yep.
Okay, that's where
So the built context there is we've got some office buildings north, a little residential scale office building to the east, and then the strip mall that has the ski shop and Crumble Cookies just east of that a little ways further. To the south, I believe, is a property zone, single family residential, but being used as I believe, a 2-family rental type property. That's my understanding, yes. So that provides the context. The proposed zoning it's R18 today. It was a family property for a long time, and the longtime owner passed away, and now it's up for sale and proposed to be to mixed use. The general plan, the land use designation along the entire Fort Union corridor area, but this area in particular as well, is mixed use. So this does not require a general plan amendment. This is what the general plan recommends for land use in this area. For that reason, staff recommends approval, and the planning commission recommended approval unanimously of this as well.
Is there land use for neighborhood commercial, or is that included with the mixed use?
There is, I
designation?
believe, a neighborhood commercial land use. So planning commission recommended approval unanimously, as well as staff. There were no public comments received on this item either. The second rezone on Fort Union is just down the street to the west a little ways. This is 1700 East in Fort Union. You can see that Mount View Park's access is directly across the street to the north. There's two properties highlighted here, and I'll explain why in a minute, but the subject properties tonight are circled in red. Again, about half an acre. It's two properties. One is undeveloped, one's a residence currently. The properties in yellow there were rezoned to mixed use a year or two ago, I believe. At the time, we suggested that they include these properties as well. And they got to the point of trying to initiate that, and the owners at the time were not interested. So that's coming back in now. The applicant of the rezone, I believe, has the red and the yellow properties either under contract or is planning to develop them cohesively. We're supportive of that because it allows better access management, better site planning, fewer conflict points with access to a site that's consolidated properties rather than for individual properties. Again, the general plan supports this change. It's mixed use throughout the area.
Could we change the previous one to mixed use, not neighborhood commercial? The yellow?
Yeah, I believe we have.
Yes. The corner properties are mixed use today. That's their current zoning.
So Mike, help me understand, how do we protect the residential low density behind there when we move to a development?
Yeah, the mixed use ordinance, the provisions in that ordinance have a lot of language that tries to buffer the impact to residential properties. You have increased setbacks with residential properties. You've got a prescriptive height limitation that's 35 feet, which is the same as any single-family residential zone. In the mixed use, you can request an additional story, but that is subject to planning commission review and approval.
Is it listed as an additional story or?
It's an additional story. In the Gateway Overlay District, it's a separate ordinance that would apply here as well. The maximum height for any structure is 45 feet. So again, this conforms to the general plan. It's a continuation of a rezone, that has been granted in the recent past.
Is this a tier, is it tier 2 or 3 on the PD?
This, I believe, would be in tier 3, but there is not enough, with these 4 parcels, that it doesn't meet the minimum size requirement for PD.
The other two homes are also in the land use designation?
Yes, the 2 homes directly to the south. Yeah.
What is the size requirement to take it to a PDD?
Yeah, it's in that ballpark. I don't know exactly.
Quite a bit larger than.
This is barely 1 though, and I know it's bigger.
Shane, this is kind of a question for you. One of the things in the mixed use is a Class D. I know you can't be a Class D private club. You can't do those within a certain distance of a school or a church. Is there any? What else is there other restrictions? Parks okay, or just schools and churches?
Schools and churches are the only ones that come to my mind right now.
There's a church right there.
There is a church.
There is a church right here. But generally, I was asking, that's one that sometimes people have a concern on, and I just didn't really.
That's my understanding as well, it's based on state code.
School?
School and church.
School and church,
All right, thank you.
There's some context there. We've had a few people interested in kind of poking around the corner properties there, and what we've realized is that to make any sort of mixed-use development feasible while also meeting all the residential setback standards, parking, landscaping, et cetera, it really starts to make more sense when you can consolidate these properties. And like I said, from a city standpoint, we're able to consolidate accesses and use better access management in that case as well.
Is the land use on these mixed uses?
It is, yeah.
But interestingly enough, that next house
Yeah,
the east.
in the east, yeah.
is not. Kind of an odd line.
All right, again, I missed what you had said
Go
earlier.
back for a second. Are those homes back there flags off of Fort Union?
They are, it's a private access
That's
road.
what I was just looking here, how do you get to these two? That's right there.
Yeah, flags.
It's owned by that rear lot. That, yeah.
1642.
Again, no public comments received on this one. Unanimous approval recommended by the planning commission.
And all the neighboring properties were notified,
They were, yeah,
Yeah.
1,000-foot notice.
just with the,
Written notice posted on the website, sent to
The registered
anyone
letter.
subscribed to the city's email blast.
was it a certified letter, was it registered,
No, it's
or
not
just
certified,
regular
it's just a regular
stamp
stamp.
on it?
Yeah.
Regular.
You said that was a 1,000 feet, cause that's our policy.
Rezone, yeah, it's an internal policy for rezones and actually most developments that we notice 1,000 feet. To property owners, not to addresses, because some are absentee property owners, so we notice the property owner's mailing address.
The state law is like 300 feet, isn't it?
Yes.
It is, and for a lot of things, the state doesn't even require that mailing notice, things like conditional uses. Okay, the third one, and this is what we've heard a little more.
Before you do that, I just
Mhm.
want to ask Councilman Sheldon, since it's in your district, any feedback you've gotten that's
None.
appropriate to,
None at all.
okay. Right, right.
Just wondering if next year we'll see those back to home.
Seems like there's a decent possibility.
Final application is a rezone and a land use map amendment. This one has that general plan component of it. To properties,
Just back, you have not received any kind of development or action on that east property.
we've discussed the ordinance and what's allowed and kind of what the standards are, but we haven't reviewed any formal development plans. We won't accept any until this process plays out. Okay, this is 3 properties on East North Little Cottonwood Road. They're 3 properties that total about 5 acres in that odd little shape there. And I think I've got a better aerial here.
The
so-
red.
The red, yeah. Granite Oaks is to the north here. The city boundary is right in this area. The high T kind of Y intersection there is just out of screen to the north as well.
Sorry, before you go on, so,
Mhm.
tell me what, so we're talking about the red,
Correct.
and then the yellow to the, I don't know, north,
Yes.
west, what is that?
That's owned by the same property owner.
Yep.
And I'll kind of explain that
Here.
The
that yellow outline,
This
it's shaped
one,
like the
okay.
letter P, kind of,
Alright.
yeah. So the yellow is not being requested for a zone change because it's got the zoning already in place that is being requested for the red. It's all
So
owned
we
by the
already,
same property.
did we change that to R115?
I think when we annexed this area, that came over as R115.
Okay.
This is the current
So
general.
Mike, and for
yeah.
those in the audience listening, can you just explain what R115 is?
R115 is a residential single-family zone. Any lot created in that zone has to be at least 15,000 square feet, which is about 1/3 of an acre. The zoning today is RR121, RR143, I apologize, which any lot has to be 1 full acre.
That's the current zoning.
Current, yeah, this is current zoning, and then I don't have a proposed zoning, but it would just be a continuation of that yellow color in the red area there. The general plan today, the future land use designation recommended is residential rural density. That generally corresponds to no more than 2 units per acre, so that would correspond to a half-acre zoning without a land use map amendment. R115 and 15,000 square foot lots is the next step down from half acre, but it does, per the general plan, merit a change in that land use designation.
We have a 26 somewhere, is that an R?
There's a RR129.
Okay, so it's an RR129.
There's 43, 29, and 21 that fall under residential rural density.
So is the R115, is that still considered as low density?
That's not rural
It's a third.
anymore, but it's low density.
So like 1/3 of an acre.
It's the lowest density, this is confusing, the lowest density, low density designation. And then that goes to R110, R18, and then down to R16 for the single family zones.
And your rural residential,
Mhm.
which we have a lot down in the creek here, some over on 23rd East and the freeway,
Mhm.
allows for different types of things, agricultural, cows, horses,
It
those
would.
types of things.
It would.
Goats.
Agricultural uses, yeah.
Discussed it.
Which could be, I don't know exactly where the watershed boundary is, could be affected in this area by watershed regulations.
So Mike, if I look at your report, it takes it from 4 lots to 6 lots?
Well,
Or 4 to 10 lots?
So to
I read
explain
that
that's, I'll explain that here quickly.
Okay.
See the existing R115 in the area, granted 15,000 square feet, but that also includes the private roadway through there in the area. But Granite Oaks, the property owned by the same applicant to the east and to the north of Granite Oaks are R115. North of that, we have a small pocket of R2, so twin home duplex zoning there. So R115 certainly isn't out of context in this area from the, just this broad analysis perspective.
How big is this, how big is the two of them together?
So this is an analysis. Here's the potential impact. Because we anticipate the property in yellow and the property in red being developed at the same time.
Together, right.
Together. We've done an analysis, and I've got a conceptual lot layout to show as well. In just the subject area, which is 5.2 acres, the 3 parcels, the existing zone, just by gross acreage, could get about 4 lots. Now, all those parcels have odd shapes, so that might not be fully practical, but just by gross acreage, taking out some area for streets, you could get about 4 lots out of 5.2
You could
acres.
do a PUD on that. That's big enough.
In either case, yes. Under the
Going by the
proposed,
gross square footage is, I think, is fair.
yeah, you need 5 acres for a PUD. Under the proposed zone, looking at only the area, the subject area, again, just by gross density in that calculation, it pencils out to about 10 lots. However, when we take that into account with the adjacent area that's already R115, based on our review and the applicant's engineer's analysis, today we feel that we could maximize that to about 22 lots. Under the proposed zone change, that becomes 26. So the net change in both of these developed together is a change in 4 lots.
I guess I don't
Not
understand
following
that.
Yeah, I lost me.
I
Change
mean,
of these
completely.
combined together.
So if you
4 or 10.
maximize the yellow and the red, based on some of the constraints
Oh,
like the
okay,
shapes
I got it.
of the lots, the steep slopes that are unbuildable, areas needed for roadways, if you develop both areas together without any zone change, we feel that about 22 lots are developable in there. With the zone change, that increases to about 26.
So this change adds about 4 lots.
Correct.
That much, is there that much 30% slope and stuff that just
Yeah.
doesn't count?
Yeah, and you have to account for road layouts and
On a PUD,
open
those
space.
are private, they get counted into the.
Right, but there's another provision. We have a code provision right now that says if you're on a private street, and this may change for a PUD, but if you're on a private road, any lot has to be half an acre. So we anticipate if it's not a PUD, which we haven't had that conversation yet, that they would propose to do a public street through here, which they'd not be able to count towards the area of lots. It'd have to be its own public street parcel.
Where would the public street, where's the ingress and egress for that? I thought the whole intent of this was to use the Granite Oaks.
It is. We don't think they would propose, there's one ingress here.
Is that the chain up area right there? Or is that
No,
further
I
down?
think that's farther down here.
Okay.
This is the access, there's some homes down in here and over here that are not part of this application that those homes use. So this would be one point of access. The other point would actually be the Granite Oaks access here. The owner has indicated they've granted an easement to Granite Oaks for this, for the Granite Oaks entryway in exchange for an access easement through Granite Oaks on the south. So we do not anticipate any new ingress or egress points.
What do you mean by anticipate?
Well,
That doesn't seem like it's a absolute, I guess.
it's not an absolute because we're at the legislative step in this process.
Yeah,
But it's going to be very difficult. This will have to run through UDOT and They've indicated they're not comfortable granting more accesses along here, especially when there are two legal points of entry in here already, which should satisfy fire requirements for having multiple points of ingress and egress. It actually helps Granite Oaks as well, because right now Granite Oaks is served by one point of access.
How does it help Granite Oaks, sorry?
Well, from a
They
fire
can-
safety
they can come
perspective,
on the other entrance.
with this many lots and this much size, you begin to approach the point where you require or want a secondary point of access in case one gets blocked or
When
something
those,
happens.
when Granite Oaks was approved, did we get, any kind of a trail easement through there?
Granite Oaks was approved by Salt Lake County before
Did they?
annexation. I don't believe so.
But that's a valid question that I asked you earlier,
Yeah.
the same question, about with this proposal, do we, I guess we're going to development.
Yeah, so we have a provision in our sensitive lands ordinance. And this will.
This is in.
This is
right?
in sensitive lands, absolutely. I will clarify that this applies with or without the zone change. But when there are hillsides, and when there are just developments in sensitive lands, the city can require trails and open space areas to make connections to other public lands, to complete a city's trail network, or at the request of the planning commission as part of the development process. So we have the authority to require trails and open spaces as property develops in sensitive lands. And we fully intend to do that in this area.
But the planning commission did not do that.
They do that at the development
At the
level.
development, sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah,
Got it.
Right.
the owners understand that.
Yes, yeah, they're aware of this provision.
Right.
It was brought up and it was presented and we've discussed that with them as well.
So just help me understand, sorry, so if we have a sensitive lands provision, what does it really do if we're allowing for a possible T zone?
The sensitive lands adds additional standards and additional study because of the unique situation of a property. So sensitive lands can mean there's high groundwater, it can mean there are steep slopes, it can mean there are fault lines. And what it does is require further analysis by a developer to go do either a geotech or a fault line, or a fault hazard study, or a slope stability study.
Which they would do later if.
At the development level, yeah, that would come next. It also requires, there's some more stringent requirements for the amount of impervious surface you can have in a development. It's got the trail provision. We've got the other provision that if it's a private road system, the lots need to be half an acre.
Is that in sensitive lands?
That I don't think is. I think that's in
That's one I'd really like to.
Title
nail
14.
down exactly what that means.
It's in Title
I'm glad
14.
this isn't up for action tonight, cause I'd be way up in there.
Well, it states that if you have a property that fronts on a private street, it must have a minimum size of 1/2 acre.
Is that new?
Back to that trails issue.
Yeah.
It gives the planning commission the right to impose.
Yeah, so what the
Require.
language says is,
May-
Right here.
May impose or.
the subdivider or other developer shall dedicate and improve to city standards trails necessary to provide public access to public lands and other trails shown on city or county master plans or required by the planning commission.
Okay.
So the first two probably don't apply.
Right, that
right?
third one doesn't.
We do reference trail connectivity through this area in some of our plans.
So we got Little Cottonwood Creek that's not too far,
I would
We'd
have to go
to
check.
connect to an existing trail.
or a planned
Ah.
trail.
Maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, trails on a master plan, city or county master plan, or required by the planning commission.
Okay.
Above and beyond that, if for subdivisions over 5 acres, there is a 10% open space requirement. If it's a PUD, that goes up to 15%
So
open
say that
space.
again, so if it's over 5 acres, it requires 10%,
10% open space,
or,
just open space. It can be private open space, public, it's just open space. And then again, if it's a PUD, that goes up by 5% to
And
15%.
that's where I'm trying to keep hashing this out. We did, just down off of Creek Road, a PUD, it had a private road, that those lots were not nearly.
I think in a PUD, you can vary lot standards and setback standards, as long as the overarching density isn't greater than what you could get under the standard zoning. There's some provisions in there for hillsides and calculating density there, but, that's how a PUD would get around that. But the intent of a PUD would be a cluster and then have
No,
more
no,
open
no,
space.
I get that, I also seen the number of them go in.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like that's what we did.
Mike, in the business meeting, will you reference the sensitive lands pieces, please?
So we, staff, you get benefits with or without the rezone. However, looking at the context of the area and looking at the potential impact of rezone versus not rezone and the odd shape and layout of the lots, we don't wanna create lots that have two zonings through one parcel, so usually
What,
the
say
sub-
that again? I don't know,
so we've got this odd panhandle.
cause our city's made up of lots of parcels.
Yeah, these are just
No kidding.
lots of record, they're not subdivided, they're not part of a platted subdivision right now. When this area goes to be subdivided, we're not gonna want a developer to create a lot that has two zoning designations in the lot. So, and this ties to staff's recommendation, which ended up being approval after some strong consideration. Just the odd layout of these three subject lots and the knowledge that this 12.5 acre piece will be developed in conjunction with this piece, it makes for cleaner lines and a more simple layout, and it doesn't result in that many more lots.
But it results in additional lots.
It does.
And
Yes.
have you and your team ever not recommended rezone for the city in general? Not you, Brian, or.
I can't speak.
The 12, 13 years that the city has been here, have we ever
Yeah.
not, which,
Again, there's been zones that would come through, it's just like, if they wanted us to do it, but we're not recommending it, that we've dealt with that.
Well, Devachi's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, that would be a, yes, that would be
That was a
a marquee
pretty big
example.
one.
And I would also state that
They definitely wanted to rezone.
Ask.
we get a lot of
and
people.
we
that-
have the right, to say no.
Right.
Absolutely.
And
We do get a
staff
lot of people
is
that call us and
obligated
come
to
in.
put it through the system if they pay the money.
Right. For a lot of the proposals that we would recommend against, we try to cut that off before it hits the public process. Unless you see a very stubborn developer that wants to proceed with the application despite staff's, recommendation against. We do talk to a lot of people about rezones and developments that we don't recommend, and they don't usually materialize into formal applications.
And can you help me understand, and you probably don't know this because it's not in the development phase, but what would be the distance between the road and the buildable lots? Do you have a sense of
Which road?
this road
Well, okay,
and the lots?
so I'm.
Are we talking about, are they gonna be right next to it, or is it?
So I'll show you a
down?
graphic after this slide, but I
Okay.
want to stress strongly that this is conceptual. It looks like a site plan, it looks like a site layout, we have not reviewed it at all, but they did an analysis of a potential layout of lots without the new zoning and with the zoning. I'm gonna show that with the caveat that it's not official, it's not been
Well,
reviewed.
nothing's official till they actually submit
We haven't,
development plan.
yeah, we haven't looked at it.
This approval or denial is not based on this at all.
Correct.
No, and it can't be.
Yep.
So before I get there, the planning commission did recommend approval 5-2, as well as staff. Okay. This is a layout that was done, just a conceptual layout by an engineer hired by the applicant. And this layout shows, a layout of lots that, this is the current zoning, so assuming no zone change.
And that's the yellow
So
and the
what you
red
see
areas
is these
together.
4 lots are the
Do you have a
subject
pointer?
area.
Oh, there, I'm sorry, I just
Yeah.
can't see as well.
Well,
It's
Yeah.
white.
Let's see. I can point to that.
Point to this one up here.
Or use your mouse as well.
No, well, that's not working, so I guess. Mouse
No,
it is.
Yeah, the mouse was
Alright.
working at least for me.
Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and I believe this is an open space, just a non-buildable parcel. This is the subject area that we're talking about tonight.
Without,
These-
without a reason.
Without the rezone. These over here are the already the area that's already zoned R115.
And that one lot closest to the road in the not rezoned area
Over here?
cuts through two zones, right? Isn't that corner in both
That,
those zones?
yeah, it might. I think the zoning boundary might be this line
I
right here.
think so too.
So that, obviously, this is just conceptual on the fly. This is the existing point of ingress that would likely be used. And then this road would cut through here and connect to Granite Oaks to the north.
Is your question about setbacks or about lot lines?
Setbacks.
Those would all be then your rear yard setbacks,
These would be rear yards, R1.
their minimums 20?
R143, the current zoning is 30 feet, the R115
RR.
is 20,
The
difference
rural
of 10 feet.
residential is bigger.
by 10
You
feet.
said 30 feet rather than.
Existing
20.
zoning's 30, proposed zoning is 20.
And that's an elevation issue too, as far as that the slope there off.
So, yeah, yellow is all sloped,
Yeah.
red is unbuildable slope. So there are portions of that that will need to be addressed.
So those lots, the homes literally would be substantially lower.
Well,
grade than-
yeah, in the yellow range, I think it's a wide range. Yellow, I think, maxes out at a 20% slope, but does include slope below that. And so this would be a conceptual layout with the proposed zoning granted. And you can see it doesn't affect the lots in this area a whole lot. It does create a few additional lots here, again, which some we may have issue with, especially in this area and down in this area.
So if you count these two plans, does that get you the 22 and 26?
This would be your 26, this would be your 22.
And that's the count that they have
Yeah.
illustrated
Right,
here.
right. Again, we haven't looked at if this meets public road standards at all, but on a public road, you need curb, gutter, park strips, sidewalk on both sides.
What's currently in there is private, right?
What's currently in there is a asphalt or dirt path, so it does substantially improve the access that's already in there. From a safety
There's no
perspective.
change to that.
Development
This
does, you're right.
Could.
Right. So yes, so that's all the information I have, but the takeaway is all these standards and these requirements are imposed regardless of whether the zone change is granted or not. And that's why when staff looked at it, it was we had to think a little harder about it, but ultimately it's, when we see the context in the area, there's a lot more R115 and a lot of precedence for that, as opposed to the R143, which is
What's
just
the
the
little
little
section
corner.
to the south, little light blue?
Half acre.
Can you,
R or not R?
This is RR 121. And actually this piece here, I don't know exactly what happened. The county actually rezoned this in 2004 to R115. And when it annexed into Cottonwood Heights, it's been RR 143.
Probably oversight.
Technically.
Yeah, I don't know, but that was a little lot. Now, on its own, this isn't really buildable or developable, but
What do we have across the street right there?
this,
Yeah.
this is half acre zoning with a development agreement on it, which precludes a lot of the steep area in the back from being counted towards density. I think that agreement allows for a maximum of 13 lots on both parcels combined.
It doesn't have anything on it, or does it have an ingress?
Over here,
Yeah.
I think there's an informal access point somewhere along here. You can see the old Jeep trail.
can you talk about the two on the planning commission, if you recall, or maybe send it to me later, that voted no,
Yeah, we-
riser and.
Yeah, the general takeaway is they didn't feel that to get these standards and to get, all these, the trails and the other standards that would be required, the rezone wasn't necessary.
Again, I guess I'm a little confused. If they didn't come in for the rezone, and they decided to start, they did a subdivision, you're saying some of those things are required when you apply for a subdivision?
Yes, in sensitive lands, these standards would apply,
Which-
regardless.
The building and road?
Okay, so
Because
regardless,
the road right now is substandard. If you're subdividing or adding lots, you have to bring that road up to current standard.
Anytime.
Yes. So, yeah, if the applicant chose not to apply for this rezone, they could initiate the subdivision, the development process, and that's an administrative application. Likely would go to the planning commission because it's over 10 lots, but would not come to city council.
Go back to the map.
But they would have to build the road and some of those other things.
Yeah, all the sensitive lands analysis, the roads, permissions from UDOT, all of that would still apply. The trail dedication would still apply.
What's happening just a little bit south of this property? As you stay along,
Over here,
Outside of the city?
is that our city limit right there?
this is the city boundary. This is the road to Lakai. Lakai's back up in here.
Oh, yeah, that's the.
So as far as I'm aware, these are just kind of older residential properties. There's a handful of homes down in here by the creek.
And as you leave the city, what's occurring?
Well, there's been some residential development fairly recently in Sandy or Salt Lake County. I don't know who's got jurisdiction here. In kind of that triangle area headed up Little Cottonwood Canyon.
What's the
Sorry,
density
where are we
there?
at?
I'm just thinking.
Is that
visual
around?
continuity.
We're outside the city. We did an analysis of the zoning in Sandy. I think it's R110 in a lot of the newer developed area. It's
That
south.
little Triangle pocket is R110.
It's R110 or 15, whatever Sandy's version of that is, and I can get that information for you.
I think it'd be nice to have visual continuity as you're driving that stretch.
All right, any further questions of Mike before we proceed?
And then just based on some numbers that Tim provided today, it looks like a house that's valued at, just say, close to $700,000 brings in $763 to our city. So for those 4 additional houses, we'll get $2,800 per year to the city.
I think with changes that result in so few net difference in homes, the housing stock analysis and the financial benefit to the city analysis aren't really helpful because the numbers are so low.
At a certain point, that is not supposed to be a discussion point on from a statutory standpoint.
Can I ask the question?
Yeah, no, I'm just.
We're not talking about the zone change, he's just educating us on
Information.
just information.
There were a handful of public comments at the planning commission, but not very many, and I'm understanding there have been probably more that have contacted
200
mayor and council.
inboxes.
Yeah, I mean, we had probably less than 10 provide public comments to the planning
10
commission
or 15 minutes.
through 2 hearings.
Okay, any further questions, discussion? It'll be on the agenda and Mark, I will go through again for the public in attendance. We have a couple action items. The first one, Shane, you may have to clarify this and help me. Your consideration of ordinance 316-A, it's approving and acting accessory dwelling unit ordinance or denying it. And now, some have asked the question, why are we doing this again? Because it was on the agenda previously.
It was
2 to 1
effectively
vote.
tabled. We didn't get enough votes either way to do anything, so it was effectively tabled. And so tonight I would ask that it either be approved or be denied, that it not be
So-
left in limbo. I mean, you can continue it, but if you're
Yeah.
taking action, why, one or the other would be appreciated.
So, for my education, so a 2 to 1 vote is not sufficient.
In our city, we need to have 3 votes to do anything.
Okay, that's why it's on.
Which, sorry,
Well, that vote, as you recall, was just to table it or not.
Is that what it was?
And so we didn't have enough votes to table it or not table it in that case.
It was effectively
Still
tabled because there
effectively
was,
tabled.
They essentially tabled it anyway, yeah.
But either way, the point is, if we have an action, it requires 3 votes to become the city's approval.
Or not.
Or not, yeah. Okay. The next item is our attendee budget, and Scott, I'd assume, it's basically, well, basically, it is the same as has been presented to us previously in this group, and you'll go through it quickly in there.
There are a couple of changes that were
Wanna share
made as
those
a
with us?
result. Yeah, I can go over that really quick if you'd like.
Yeah.
If I can hand these out, if you could take one of those each. And, so. I'll use the overhead just to kind of get you to the page that I'm on so that we can kind of refer to things. So, if you turn the cover page back, so this isn't a change, but we start off with $2,253,000 available for appropriation in our general fund. We did make a few adjustments in revenue, line item to line item, but it didn't change things in total. We were trying to get to a pretty accurate place of where we think our projections are gonna be this year. For instance, one of the things that we changed was our Class C roads funds. We had that at $1.2 million, and we've increased that amount to $1,240,000. We think that's probably more realistic of where that's going to land for this year and probably continue into next year. So one of the items that we actually decreased a little bit was energy use tax. That's been down just a little bit, and we decreased that one down just a little bit. But net of all the changes that we did, there was no net change in overall revenues. As we went through there, we just were trying to look at it. That was more of a fluke than anything. I was kind of glad in some ways that happened, that it didn't go down, for instance, as we went through that. So going to second page there, page 2 of 6. Our total revenue change is this $102,657, and that represents about 0.52% growth in revenues. So our revenues are not growing exponentially. Going into the employee cost, just to review really quick, 1.9% is the recommended COLA. 3.7% is the recommended, oops, I missed this, merit. And then the health costs did change. So we had a placeholder in there of 5%, I believe, and it came in at 0.5%. So a significant savings there, the net increase there being $4,056. On healthcare, however, that came in at 7% because healthcare costs are quite a bit lower than, dental costs are quite a bit lower than health. That was $4,104. So the net health and dental was $8,160. We had about $50,000 in there. I don't remember the exact amount. It might have been $49,000 in our prior budget that we had. Let's see, in the market study, we had talked about that last time. We had $50,000 in there to do an external market study, and there was the recommendation from council to pull that out and do it internally. However, we asked for $10,000 to have an intern to help chase phone calls and things that we need to do as we try and coordinate data and crunch that data so that we can get everything together from our comparative municipalities that we're gonna do there. So that's a net savings from the prior recommendation of $40,000. Also added was some money for a city survey, and that's to update community expectations. We estimate that to be about $15,000, so that was an add into that. On the newsletter, where is the newsletter?
Did you change the amount of elections, did you say that?
The elections we have not yet changed. We still have the elections in there at 60. And so if the referendum is definitely out, and I didn't actually hear one way or another where that is.
Having a public conservative to have it in there.
Yeah.
It's in there because there could still be a petition to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
That's still a viable option.
We can make a decision to put something on the ballot.
Yeah, and so that is in there, but if that doesn't come to be, that would not be spent in other ways. And so if it doesn't come to be, we could either adjust the budget or not. Whichever way you go, that's not gonna matter either way. On the newsletter, we had recommended a $26,000 cut on the newsletter to reduce to a quarterly newsletter, and we took that out based on recommendations from the last time we talked. And then also on the parade float, we decided to pull that out, based on both, conversations externally and at the last time that we met, and that was originally a $17,000 reduction.
Now it's at
Yeah.
12.
We're pulling out the removal.
The removal, yes,
Yeah.
we're eliminating the removal, so.
So
Still
didn't,
having the
didn't you say it was going from 17 to 12?
That's what I understood.
So, yeah, we had talked about, was it 1712 or what it was, and as Tim and I talked, and what's reflective in what is before you is no reduction in the float, so the float would continue in year over year, well, into next year at least, and that, then, the help with that is that if we don't have a float to go to other cities, then other cities don't come and reciprocate back to us, and that was kind of what drove that.
That's the difference between 17 and 0, but not
17 and
not
12.
17.
Yeah.
Historically, it's been in that.
Twelve was more realistically what the annual cost of the
The
float was.
reduction, because in the previous budget showed it as 17.
Yes.
And in this proposal, it's also at 17.
No, it's at 0, so don't cut anything
No,
out,
okay,
so it's funded at,
So,
At
which is-
17.
that's the full parade cost, so that's float plus some other costs that go with the
Yeah,
parade.
it's not just float,
Is it
there,
not
there were
so much
other
money
aspects.
I see.
But then Councilmember Michael made some good suggestions that also we'll talk about later too, as far as appropriate signage on the back and materials, possibly volunteer stuff we'll look at. Okay, well, we won't do that tonight.
Okay. Let's see, flipping to the next page, 3 of 6 there. Down in fire, about halfway through the page, we changed that to be a net of 185,656, which represents a 5.11% increase. Confirming with Chief Watson, that matches with what's gone through the Finance Committee as of, was it today or yesterday? Today. And so that should match there. They have not yet adopted the budget, so that could change, but that's matching with kind of where it's heading right now. The FTE changes haven't, there was no change from the last go around. So down at the bottom, in the bottom paragraph of page 3 of 6, so that uses $597,813 of fund balance in this year. The back of the napkin from last year was about $695,000, so it's about $100,000 better than what was last year. The current, yeah, the current projected ending balance is $3,331,000. Flipping to the other page, taking out the stuff that we need, which by city ordinance is 6%, so that's about $1,193,000. And then also there's about $485,000 of PTO vacation that we need to pull out. That leaves $1,653,000 available for appropriation at the end of June 2020 there.
And that does not plus any potential underspending.
Yes, exactly. Underexpend would augment that. Going to the capital improvements, the stormwater, right here, we added the stormwater master plan and facilities update for $92,000 to utilize some funds in the capital improvement fund on that. We added the East Jordan Canal Trail, a net cost to the city of $25,000. That's $225,000 of expense with $200,000 of revenue to offset that expense. Those items, once they all factor through, would leave a net reduction in fund balance of $435,000 down towards the bottom there, and that net reduction would bring the ending projected fund balance that would be available for appropriation of $449,000 at the end of that year. So almost $500,000 available in the general, or in the capital improvements fund for items that may need to be there.
And putting those two fund balance together would be $2 million.
Yeah, 2 to 2.1 million plus any under expend.
Also, I think it's important to note too that there's a major change that's shown here with respect to our engineering services and stuff.
There is, yes, that is still contained in the budget, yes. Going to page 5 of 6, nothing changed here until you get down to the very end. Solar at City Hall, we received the initial estimate. It's between $468,000 and $607,000 for solar at this site at the building. That does not include any building structural costs. That has not been evaluated. So the cost of that is higher than what we initially had. I think we had 250 to like 500,000 in the last estimate that we had in there, if I'm correct. I could be wrong on that amount that we had.
We'll be getting that report out to you.
Is that, you just got one quote or multiple quotes?
No, this was the
The study.
analysis, the study that was done by the engineering group.
You had one previously when you built the building, right? Because you had thought about it and you built it. so
Yeah,
when it
I
could-
The
think it was-
architect.
So it was
they
probably,
looked
yeah,
at
the
it.
architect, but it was pretty rough. Yeah, but this is kind of where we come up with a 47-year payback.
Yeah, this
Was
payback is between
even
13 and
31 is-
31 years, and it depends a lot on rates and what you expect rates to do in the future and all kinds of
Expected to be
things like
flat.
that. Yeah, I don't,
So it's 31,
yeah, it probably
be interesting.
longer rather than
You-
shorter.
When they completely finalize the study, we're just reviewing the draft, but these were the numbers.
Did you share it with Rocky Mountain Power too? I think
We
you-
haven't yet, cause it's not quite finalized. When it's finalized, we'll submit it to the council.
I think, my
And-
preference would be to get their feedback before we see it,
Okay,
because I think they'll help you with restrictions.
Yeah.
yeah. Matt, we can do that.
That's all of the changes, going forward, the other items,
Sorry, I might just say, also,
oh, go ahead.
I think you would wanna ask your consultant, if you put the panels in 2022, what the difference in cost would be versus next year, because panel prices will come off the tariff, remember, I think I mentioned that the last time, in
Oh.
2022, so you might see some savings, this seems high to me, so.
And we also, we briefly mentioned the CDR fund and status of that. Page 5 and 6.
Okay, what did you want me to do on that, Mayor?
Well, so the revenues is just the interest earned, right?
Yeah, we will have
Expenses,
received.
we have expenses coming in this year as well.
Yeah, what it is we'll receive a net of $7,750,000 during our current budget year for the Canyon Center project. That's the predominant revenue. And then that money will spend, I don't think they'll have all of that spent by the end of June, so some of that might carry forward into the first little bit of our next budget year. When that money finally spends out, plus we anticipate a little bit of, professional fee type costs as we look at additional, areas. to
2 new
potentially
areas that
add.
we'll propose to you next month, or next meeting. excuse me.
Yes, and so anyhow, so there's a little bit of fees in there. That brings the ending fund balance to $1,652,000. I think it was about $1,008,000-ish, give or take, roughly maybe a year ago. I'm not sure exactly on that one, so maybe quote me on that. But we'll be about $1,650,000 at the end of the budget year, and that's the, if you will, the older monies that have been around for a little bit from the 2 other properties that or 2 other developments that happened sometime in the past.
That we have the ability to appropriate at some point.
Yes,
Under
yes.
the guidelines, parameters of this.
So going forward, that money is there that can be used in certain instances, of course with the blessing of you all in your other.
Hats.
Yes.
Okay, questions of Scott or Tim on this?
We did, and I missed the meeting where a lot of this
So we
conversation.
can't ask any questions?
No.
No.
But we did talk about using some of that, I don't even know what to call it, the CD.
Redevelopment
The
agency.
redevelopment agency money to do, for example, the trail. in-
Possibly, yeah.
You're not proposing that in the tentative
So
budget?
for the canal,
Canal trail, yes.
that's proposed in capital. So 25,000, the
Yeah.
match dollars.
But
is
what he's
proposed in
saying is
capital.
that
We,
if we
yeah, we
wanted to.
could transfer some money from the CDRA to capital if
Yeah,
we
that's
wanted.
good.
But it's not reflected in here.
reflected.
Yes.
It's not reflected.
Okay, thank you.
But those opportunity funds we wanna talk about going forward, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of it. So if you have other questions, please let me
No,
know.
again, thank you, this is such an improvement with what we went through last year that, again, I applaud the two committees who've done homework prior to getting it to this point, and their staff and department heads and the process you've gone through.
And I just want to note that this will be available online if it's not already, and it will also be available, I'll have a handful that I'll give to the front counter in case somebody wants a hard copy.
And after tonight, if
Here.
somebody calls and asks for a copy, they refer them to online, or you can mail them what they really
Yes.
desperately want. one week
I
ago.
have to say that, I'm still having a really hard time with her website. The only easy way for me to find ADUs was to do a Google search, ADU Cottonwood Heights, and it brings me to the page. I don't know if it's, maybe we could have it scrolling again. I know we've talked about this, when you first go to the homepage, the budget, so you can just click on it, that's scrolling.
Well, we have a new person at the end of the table, we can challenge Tim to try and make that happen.
Yeah, we can
What's
put
the
it on.
magic, Tim?
Let's do it.
I agree.
These search functions.
And again, to emphasize that we are not going through truth and taxation.
No, there's no proposed tax changes. We, now, just kind of so everyone knows about, they're supposed to get us certified tax rates on June 8th. Sometimes they miss that number, that date. So we won't be able to adopt our budget on June 4th, but on June 18th, certified rate, and we'll know what our certified new growth happens to be at that point in time. So the property tax number will definitely change, not materially probably, but it will change. Outside of that, unless you recommend something to us or we notice something material that we missed and bring it to your attention, we're not necessarily anticipating changes, but changes can
But
happen.
again, I think we need to emphasize to the council, this is a tentative budget. If
Yes.
there's something that is a concern to the council, let us know. We have an opportunity to visit here in the next, approximately 30 days. Also, I think it's important to note, because I think we all get questions, when residents get a copy of their tax notice, sometimes they think all those taxes are ours.
Yes.
There's two entities that are proposing a fairly substantial increase. One is the service area, they went through truth and taxation already earlier this year. So
So they're not proposing, they have done it.
they've done it, and it's a 50% increase
Yeah.
For those who pay it.
Yeah.
for those who live within the district. Yeah, some people live just outside of it. And also, I think we're all aware of Canyon School District and what they're doing, and the teacher pay increase. And, so, we're aware of those.
So when you say 50% for the service district, what does that amount to in dollars for the renter?
Average home.
Average home can be as high as about $100. I'm just off the top, I could be off the my personal goes like just over 200, so I imagine it's in there. But, and again, and we can refer people to their website and their information, but I know that I went to their truth and taxation meeting, and they had a lot of people there. They took some heat, because people want to see, well, what are you doing with it? And so because of that, I think, I know the Parks, Trails, Open Space Committee has looked at remaster planning a park and trying to give some things back, but I don't have all the details.
What they're not doing is shutting down a rec center,
Yeah.
which hit the news today. Mark Jensen Rec Center is just gonna be closed in March.
Which one?
Mark Jensen.
Yeah, Mark Jensen, but that's Salt Lake County.
Or South Jordan.
But that was a rec center that was normally a private facility that was bought and renovated to a kind of a quasi rec center, and since then Zap has built two new ones nearby, so it's a different issue. Okay, we have two other action items, unless any more questions on the budget. So one is resolution 2019-26, that's declaring an item of surplus, and that's the laptop computer. Well, you want to talk about that, Tim?
Yeah, I can go ahead and do that. So we have it's an older 2015 Apple MacBook Pro. We would like it to be considered surplus. It's a general rule. We try and stay on the IBM machines. It works better in our network environment and things like that. It does have some value still, even though it's an older Apple.
$600.
About $650. We currently have an offer of $650 to buy that computer. So options, we can retain the computer and not sell it. We can sell the computer to the person who's interested, or one other that I didn't note on here is we could also just put it out there and see if we could sell it for something else. I know, well, Matt has done some research and believes that we could sell it for about $650 to several other entities and stuff.
And to be transparent, I think it's the computer that Dan had,
Yeah.
and if you've got an objective evaluation, it's kind of like a police officer gun, I guess.
Yeah, and it's not a computer we intend to continue to use, so, yeah.
Just a clarification on the gun thing. We only give the guns on retired officers. Yeah, no, I'm just saying. Just-
It's my faux pas again.
No, Meredith, I didn't mean it like that.
All right, 4.4, resolution 2019-27, amending the designated areas closed to discharge of fireworks. Chief Watson, you wanna, I know that you looked at that, and I was involved indirectly with.
If you want, I've got the maps here, I can just kind of give an overview.
That would be great.
At the request of a resident who was concerned about some of the areas that were not included, UFA, Chief Larson and others went out and reassessed some of the areas that were not previously included. I've got the pointer working, okay, we're good. So this is the previous map, it's a little harder to see, but the area of concern was this kind of area west of Danish Road, specifically in here. It was kind of surrounded on all sides, but not fully covered. That was based on our conservative review of the state code provisions. However, there is some additional authority granted to the fire authority to expand those areas. After that site visit and an analysis of the surrounding area, the figure on the right is what's being proposed as the amended restricted area. So again, it only focuses on this area, but what it does now is expand to everything south of Creek Road and Danish Road in this little corner of the city, which is significantly more area, but a more consistent area and easier to understand area than it was previously.
Did you take some area out there?
Nothing was removed.
So what's the little,
So this
Down
was
there,
part
yeah.
of our original analysis. This is the Giverny property that was previously in the restricted area. Because it's all developed now, it's been taken out, but that was done.
But
a
if you
couple
drive
weeks ago.
along Danish, heading to Bob Jacobs' neighborhood, everything on, well, actually both sides of Danish, and especially on the east side, it's a shrub oak hillside that's naturally involved. You get into that neighborhood, it's encircled by hills and shrub oak and stuff, so it's, I mean, that's a good improvement.
Yeah, and right, in the area that Mike first circled, where the resident lives, if you map it, and we've done this twice now, but if you map it from the edge of the gully, it goes across the street and halfway into the lots of the homes across the street, which would only leave their backyards open to use of fireworks, which just doesn't make sense, right? And so if you extend that same concept up along Danish, it just makes sense to use that language of south of Creek Road and west of Danish, because remember, the code allows you to go to the most sensible landmark, street, road, or something like that, even though it includes areas outside of the 200 feet, so that it's understandable and folks can see those markings.
So have we got this to the county in time and everything?
Well, they know it's coming. Emergency management was told this was coming, and we'll get it in so that it can get posted by June 1.
As long as you get it before you retire, that's good.
That may be a little lenient.
I can throw it in. Okay,
Is
any questions?
there a full zoomable high-res version of this on our site?
This will be. This isn't on there right now because it's not adopted. So this is a higher resolution PDF. There's also going to be an interactive ArcGIS map that you can scale into and search properties.
Because this one wasn't, you can't, if you're close, I mean, I zoomed in around this area, I couldn't tell where the streets were and where they were not.
So
Yeah,
Mike,
so-
if you had this estimate off the top of your head, how would this compare to where we were, say, 4 or 5 years ago, as far as amount of restricted areas?
Well, I'm gonna be throwing a dart at the wall, right? But
I'm just curious,
since
since the fire.
Crestwood Park, I would
Yep.
say you've probably added another 15 to 20% in the overall.
Yeah, I would probably higher, but yeah, okay.
I think the statutory language change in allowing it to go to things that make sense,
Yeah.
really has made it a lot easier for people to understand. The Danish drone would especially be really a nightmare to try to.
And I'm speaking to the area of your city, not the closure. So if you're talking to what was closed before, then the percentage would be higher.
That's right, yeah. Okay, any questions or further discussion on the business meeting agenda? Okay, if not, Ann, come on up. Let's talk about proposed revisions to the city facility use policy.
There you go.
All right, so, I was tasked to look at the facility use policy. Adding, a few things to it and looking at some of the other things it's been since, when it was first developed back when, we started using it August of 2016. I wanted to make some changes to the policy just from the use and how things have happened. So I wanted to kind of go through things and then give you my recommendation of what we came up with. Most of the beginning part is just Shane went over it and changed some of the wording. Made it a little more clearer. Nothing really changed in just the basic part. Changes came at the rental space available building area. One of the areas that we took off of this is the small administrative council conference room. I think I rented it out one time, that was it. It's just too small, inconvenient for anyone to use it. So we just kind of took that off. It was kind of an easy, just kind of take off thing. Nothing with the building rental hours, we just kind of left it all the same. Nothing with the limits, that's all just the same. Rental fees is where we kind of really went in and I cleaned it up on that area. This up here. Okay, so on the rental fee part, I wanted to just kind of, and it was kind of fun kind of putting this together. I've not looked at it in this way. We started renting it out August 2016. You can see we just had the 14 rentals. Not many people knew about it. 2017 went up to 55, and you can kind of see where all the what people are renting the building for. What that community room, or it could even be this room. It could be the chambers. What people want it for. 2018, we went up to 88 total rentals. Weddings are hit. It's kind of funny, all of a sudden last year baby showers were the big thing. I couldn't believe how many baby showers we were doing. And we went into, and then government was another big hit. 2019.
When you say government, does that include anything that we do ourselves?
No.
Okay,
No.
Just like the
No.
CWC or?
That's other agencies wanting to come in and use it, things like that.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
that open house that we had a
Yeah,
couple weeks
yeah,
ago would be an
yeah.
example.
Some of that, yes. If they go through me, it is. If they go through, say something that planning and development's going to do, then I don't record it.
Good, good.
But if it goes through me as a rental, I record it.
Outside agency.
Yeah, I record it. So besides just the 88, I do on 2018, I do a lot of other scheduling for that room. So between whoever might need it, I still do quite a bit of other scheduling for the rooms. 2019, from January to May to right now, we're at 51. Last year, I did not hit 51. I started 51 in August of last year. So that's how many more were already a few months way into it. Of course, there's nothing on Christmas because you have 120 days before you can, we have allotted that they can actually reserve. So they're reserving it now up to August 6th, 7th right now. They can't go further than that. That gives the city time to book things that we might need in those spaces. So that's why you're not seeing anything for like the holiday and things like that. So rentals have, I mean, I don't know what the percent is on that, but I think you're gonna see a huge, keep seeing the increase. People are finding it and seeing it, knowing more about it. With this, in 2017, I had one non-resident run it. In 2019 so far, I've had 3 non-residents, just so kind of have that on there. Fee schedule, my goal was to minimize the schedule, reevaluate fees, and add overage charges. This is your current schedule. Most people see it and are confused. They just call me and say, I don't understand it. Can you just tell me how much it's going to cost me? I have it pinned to my thing, and sometimes I get confused and I have to look at it and try and figure it out. Proposed schedule, this is what it would come down to. Community room with kitchen, $40 per hour, which will be increased from what we're at, but we'll kind of go. Residents, 501c3, nonprofit business within city limits would get
Okay,
that.
the current is 20, right?
Yes. And non-residents and businesses outside would jump to 80. Government's free during business hours. That's not changing, but it does change after business hours because we do have to have staff here and other things happen. Chambers and workroom, that is right now, this room is only $10 an hour. It would jump to $35 per hour. Residents, nonprofit businesses within city limits again. Non-residents or business would jump to 70, government would be free, and then again, after hours, 35. So if we just looked at the community room with the kitchen, this kind of shows you the current policy at the 20, $50 per hour for non-residents, $100 per hour for businesses within the city, and businesses outside the city is $100. Government is free during, again, $20. Proposed fee would jump it to $40 per hour for businesses too, $80 per hour for non-residents or business outside the city. Government would be free. So you can kind of see the one big thing is businesses at $100 an hour is within the city is just too much for them to use it. We just don't get very many businesses wanting it, especially the mom and pop places. Chambers and workroom, this one's a little bit tricky to write out, so I hope you understand it. As I said, the chambers was the same price as the community room. at the $20 an hour. This room was only $10 an hour. Non-residents, the chambers was $50 an hour, where this room, again, 20. And then you go to your $100 an hour, this room was 20 for businesses. Then you go down to the proposed, that we proposed $35 per hour, the $70 per hour, for non-residents or businesses without site, and then government would be free. Kind of where we're proposing that. Why the fee changes? So where we came up with the amount. $40 per hour for the community room and $35 per hour for chambers and workroom. For $30 of that hour is employee wages. You have the room monitor, you have, of course you don't have me there the whole time, but you do have, it seems like I visit with people a lot, you probably with your rental. A lot of people feel like I'm their wedding consultant. This Friday I spent 30 minutes with someone in there checking out the system just so their wedding would go perfectly on Saturday. And then again, so you've got the room monitor, mine, and then you have the maintenance, what Philip does for fixing things for me and things like that. Then you have $5 to $10 for wear and tear.
Do you think that's enough?
You're barely, I didn't want to go too high because.
I mean, for wear and tear.
Yeah.
I mean.
The $20, the last time everybody just wanted to make it reasonable for people to use. $20 is reasonable, but it's not at all paying for the wages.
It doesn't cover the cost, the incremental cost of doing it.
Right. But if you do $40 an hour, it's a minimum, what we did change on all of this, it's a minimum of 2-hour rental on all rooms, not just, this room here was only an hour, and I can't get somebody to come in for an hour, a room monitor or anything. And they really can't get in here and get out in an hour. So everything's 2 hours, so if you do 2 hours in the community room, that's $80. Most people, the average is 4, some are higher. I've had a couple that did make that 2 hours in and out. Your average is about 4. That's 160. I mean, that's where I'm thinking.
Did you do any market comparisons?
I did, and it's hard to find things that are equal to this building, that have the same thing to this building.
I agree.
And the ones that I came back with is like West Jordan City. They have one, residence is $25 an hour, non-residence is $30, no staff. That's turnkey. Draper City is from $29 to $36 an hour for residents, depending if it's day or evening or weekend, I think. And then non-residents $36 to $45, no staff. And Riverton had a $45 no staff fee, and I couldn't find a non-resident on that one, so it looks like it might just be 45.
What about like Holiday or the neighboring community? Do you happen to see?
Holiday is, I didn't get their fees on theirs. They're kind of like waiting for ours.
Yes, they're waiting for ours.
And then you've got other places that are quite a bit more, or just look at it differently. And a lot of these, even I'm breaking these down. A lot of them are like half a day, $200, or I was just trying to break it down to what we're doing. Well, and then there's other ones that say South Salt Lake, they're about this price, but then they add every little thing you do. A table, they add extra charges, and we don't add those extra charges. So I was trying to come up with something that is still.
And what percentage of your time would you say you're doing with rental?
I could do one at 15 minutes, or
So-
it could take 45 minutes sometimes. It depends, because.
But you're saying like over the course of the year,
Yeah, so
5%
I'm
of
looking
your
at
time.
your position, so.
In my position,
10% of your time, 5% of your time?
right now, with how many rentals I have, it's probably taking 30%.
Really?
Just right now with all the rentals. I did 5 rentals just yesterday.
Yeah, to know, if you talk about 88 rentals, you're talking less than 2 per week, but
Yeah.
it's going up.
But it's, yeah.
and doubling
it's-
this year, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
And the fee increase will mitigate some
The
of that.
fee increase might bring it down, but it will bring the businesses in. So it may bring down some of the, but I get businesses wanting to do a Christmas party and they find out it's $100 and it's just like, no, I can't do a Christmas party, you know, that's way too much money. So I don't know where it's gonna land.
Well,
But
the
is
issue
this enough
the reason
accept-
we built this room, there's nothing in our city.
Yeah, and people are finding out about it. And people do rent it, they do agree this is way too much. I've talked to a lot of the renters,
Way too much?
or too little.
Too little.
Yeah.
$20 an hour is
Absolutely
way too little.
Way
Way
too
too
little,
little.
and even
Way
at
too
$40
little, I
an
know.
hour,
Yeah.
it's
It's
still
like,
too little.
can I,
But again,
can
there's
I
that,
rent a room
there's
for
that
a
balance
month?
too, where it's a
I'd like to move
public
in.
facility.
Yeah, it's, I mean, if you wanna go more, we can. I was just trying to balance it. I mean, even Scott would say, you know, let's bump it to 50, just for the wear and tear part. But then that's, for 4 hours, that's $200. Is that too much,
Not for 4 hours.
you know, for someone to rent it when they've been renting it for $80 for those 4 hours?
I kinda like that number, 50. For what they get, I mean, that includes the kitchen, includes the furniture, includes the
Yes.
staff person here to facilitate.
The school counts as government?
Yes, but unless it's in the evening. Now, if it's in the evening, they have, but, the school, but not the extra activities.
A club.
The clubs are, yeah,
Clubs and sports all paid?
they're not free. They're not free, they pay. Yeah, but
Football
Brighton
team
High,
is-
Brighton High School English teachers come over and use it for free.
The football team and soccer team?
No,
and
they
the
pay.
lacrosse team all?
Yeah, they would pay. And I don't think they couldn't afford the,
Couldn't you
40,
stick them though as,
Do we have
as
a-
nonprofit, or can we just
Yeah.
change the?
We wouldn't want them to be less than the rest of the property.
Or do we have in our policy the ability for someone to petition for a fee waiver for the inability to pay? Is that in our policy?
there is. There actually is, and it's written out by,
For
the city manager can approve anything in the policy.
So if someone
Yes.
has a special,
Yes. And I'll double check the wording on that, but I do know that there was something mentioned in that.
You think about it though, for a 4-hour rental, you pay between $20 and $40 for wear and tear. Wear and tear is just way more than that, which means the incremental cost of them renting it is being passed on to the rest of the taxpayers. And their use should cover
we
the
should cover
majority
it.
of the costs.
We should cover it.
So just last year, in 2018, we spent $1,400 just on carpet cleaning for that
I
room.
was gonna say that's.
But that's, staff uses it too, and that's, you know, it's, I mean, but it was, one chair, to replace one chair in that room is $100. To replace the click share, if it was missing at one point, so we looked it up, is $300. To replace one HDMI cable was $100. So we know that the, projector is, about 40% of its life.
Well, just the equipment itself, it should last to about 8 years.
8 years.
So 6 to 8 years.
Yeah.
Okay, we're running out of time.
Those are things to look at.
And we haven't
Sorry.
talked about the alcohol use yet.
Okay.
You wanna stay around, or you gonna? We wanna get through this, but we've gotta go on the other side.
Are we providing direction, are we?
Well,
okay
we're
with
gonna,
it?
today we're providing direction. We've not even heard the other piece of the proposal, which is alcohol use.
Yeah, today is,
We're not voting on it.
we submitted this to you.
No, I know we're not
for
voting on it,
input.
but it sounds like some of us have input that we.
Yeah, I know,
should
I
give
think we
action
wanna
on,
do
right?
that,
So-
yeah.
Yeah.
well,
Yeah, whatever input, and then we'll come back.
But we can give input now, we need to come back, because we have input on the price, but there's some other narratives that we didn't talk about, and we'll support of including in the, proposal. Big one's the alcohol use. Can you stay around? Sure. Much choice, we appreciate it. Okay. We'll adjourn to the, business meeting, and